Imagine a lonely farmhouse, swallowed by the silence of a Bavarian winter. Smoke curls from the chimney, the cattle are fed in the barn, and inside, food has been eaten from the kitchen. It looks like a normal, peaceful scene. But this house holds a secret so dark, so chilling, it has confounded investigators for 100 years. For days, someone has been living here, tending to the farm. The only problem is, the entire family that calls this place home is already dead, their bodies hidden just yards away. This is the story of Hinterkaifeck, one of history's most disturbing and completely unsolved mass murders. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we're journeying back to 1922, to a remote homestead in Germany that became the stage for a crime so bizarre, it feels more like a horror movie than a historical event. What happened at Hinterkaifeck goes beyond a simple murder. It's a tale of a phantom intruder who stalked a family, lived among their corpses, and then vanished without a trace, leaving behind a legacy of pure, unanswered terror. Our story begins and ends at Hinterkaifeck, a small farmstead about an hour's drive north of Munich. Living there was the Gruber family. The patriarch was 63-year-old Andreas Gruber, a stern and reportedly difficult man. He lived with his 72-year-old wife, Chiselia. With them was their 35-year-old widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, and her two children, 7-year-old Chiselia and 2-year-old Joseph. The farm was isolated, set back from the main road, and the Grubers were known to be private people, which only adds to the mystery of what was about to unfold. On the very last day of March 1922, a new maid, 44-year-old Maria Baumgartner, arrived to begin her first day of work. She had no idea it would also be her last. The horror didn't start with the murders. It began much earlier, with a slow, creeping dread that settled over the farm. In the days leading up to the massacre, Andreas Gruber was deeply unsettled. He confided in his neighbors about a series of strange and inexplicable events. He'd found a set of footprints in the fresh snow, leading from the dense forest directly to the farmhouse. He searched for hours, but found no corresponding footprints leading away. It was as if someone had walked out of the woods, entered his property, and simply vanished into thin air. But that was just the beginning. Soon after, the family began hearing strange noises. Footsteps creaking from the attic above them in the dead of night. Andreas searched the attic multiple times, armed and ready, but he never found anyone. The sounds persisted, a phantom guest living right above their heads. Then, a set of house keys went missing. A few days later, an unfamiliar newspaper, one they didn't subscribe to, mysteriously appeared on the porch. The family was being watched, studied, and tormented by an unseen presence. The previous maid had actually quit her job 6 months earlier, claiming the house was haunted. Perhaps what she heard wasn't a ghost, but something far more terrestrial and far more dangerous. The Grubers were trapped, isolated on their own land, with a stalker who was growing bolder by the day. On the evening of Friday, March 31, 1922, the phantom finally decided to act. The sequence of events that investigators piece together is methodical and deeply disturbing. It's believed the killer used a simple but brutal strategy, luring the family members, one by one, to their deaths. The first to be drawn into the barn were likely Victoria and her 7-year-old daughter, Chiselia. Then, Andreas Gruber and his wife, Chiselia, followed, perhaps called out to check on the livestock or investigate a noise. Inside the dimly lit barn, they were met with savage violence. Each one was struck down with a mattock, a type of pickaxe used for farming. The attacks were focused and overwhelming, ensuring no one could fight back or cry for help. After eliminating the 4 family members in the barn, the killer moved silently toward the main house. Inside, the new maid, Maria Baumgartner, who had arrived just hours before, was in her chambers. She was killed in her bed, never even having a chance to understand the nightmare she had walked into. Finally, the killer entered the nursery where 2-year-old Joseph lay sleeping in his crib. The toddler was the last victim. In one horrific evening, an entire family, spanning 3 generations, was wiped out. The killer then stacked the bodies in the barn and partially covered them with hay, A final, chilling act before the next, even stranger phase of the crime began. This is where the Hinterkaifeck case transcends from a brutal murder to something out of a psychological thriller. The killer did not flee. Instead, they stayed. For at least 3 days, from Friday night until the following Tuesday, the murderer lived on the farm, surrounded by the bodies of their victims. Think about that for a moment. They weren't hiding in fear, they were making themselves at home. Neighbors later reported seeing smoke rising from the chimney throughout the weekend. This meant the killer was lighting the stove to keep warm, perhaps even cooking meals. When the crime scene was eventually discovered, investigators found that the cattle and other livestock in the barn had been recently fed and watered. Someone had gone about the daily farm chores as if nothing had happened. Food had been eaten from the kitchen, and a bed looked like it had been slept in. The killer wasn't just hiding, they were living, existing in the space they had so violently emptied. This cold, calm, and methodical behavior is what has baffled psychologists and criminologists for a century. What kind of person slaughters 6 people and then calmly feeds their cows? It suggests a level of detachment and composure that is almost inhuman. For several days, no one thought anything was wrong. The Grubers were known for keeping to themselves, so their absence wasn't immediately noticed. 7-year-old Chislia failed to show up for school on Monday, but it was initially brushed off. The postman noticed the mail piling up, but didn't raise the alarm. It wasn't until Tuesday, April 4th, that a neighbor, Lorenz Schlittenbauer, organized a search party after becoming concerned. When they arrived at the farm, they found an eerie stillness. They called out, but only silence answered. After checking the house and finding it empty, they moved to the barn. And there, beneath a layer of hay, they made the gruesome discovery: the bodies of Andreas, his wife, his daughter, and his granddaughter. They immediately alerted the authorities. Police arrived to a scene of organized carnage. Inside the house, they found the bodies of the maid, Maria, and little Joseph. The Munich Police Department launched a massive investigation, but the case was immediately plagued with problems. The crime scene had been contaminated by the well-meaning search party, and the initial autopsies, conducted right there on the farm, were basic. Investigators were faced with a confounding puzzle. There was no sign of a robbery. In fact, a large sum of money was found and touched in the house. This wasn't a crime of greed. The motive seemed to be personal, yet the brutality was aimed at everyone, including a maid who had no connection to the family and a 2-year-old child. The weapon, believed to be the family's own matic, was never found, though it was likely cleaned and hidden somewhere on the vast property. The list of suspects was long but ultimately led nowhere. One of the primary suspects was Karl Gabriel, Victoria's husband, who was officially declared killed in action in World War I. However, some theorized he had survived and returned to seek revenge, fueled by rumors that he wasn't the father of little Joseph. Another prominent suspect was Lorenz Schlittenbauer himself, the neighbor who discovered the bodies. He had a complicated history with the family, including a rumored affair with Victoria, and his behavior after the discovery was considered suspicious by some. Police investigated local vagrants, drifters, and even family members, but every lead went cold. No one could be definitively placed at the scene, and no one confessed. Over the decades, the Hinterkaifeck farm was torn down, leaving nothing but an empty field and a small memorial. All that remains is the story, a ghost story, really, of a killer who became a phantom resident. Was it an act of personal vengeance? Was it a stranger who simply wanted the farm for themselves for a few days? Or was it something else entirely, a motive so twisted we can't even comprehend it? The killer took their secrets to the grave, leaving the Hinterkaifeck murders as a permanent, chilling fixture in the annals of true crime. It serves as a haunting reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not ghosts or demons, but ordinary people capable of extraordinary evil, who can walk among us and then simply disappear. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's most unsettling mysteries. If you found this story as fascinating and chilling as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Let me know your theories about the Hinterkaifeck killer in the comments below. Stay curious and stay safe.